Welcome to The Culture Shift. We want this podcast to empower you as leaders to make impactful change in your workplace. I'm Vicki Baars, and I specialise in transforming organisations through equity, diversity and inclusion initiatives. In each episode, we'll delve deep into the fascinating world of workplace culture. Join me as I sit down with an array of incredible guests, including members of our very own Culture Shift team and industry experts. Through these thought-provoking conversations, we aim to equip you with the knowledge, tools, and inspiration you need to drive positive change in your workplace. Whether it's breaking down barriers, thinking about how you include a more diverse workforce, or fostering a culture of collaboration and belonging, we've got you covered. So let's dive straight into an episode. Hello and welcome back to The Culture Shift. Today I'm delighted to be sitting down with Chelsea Maher, Head of Marketing here at Culture Shift. The reason we wanted Chelsea to be the person to talk about this topic is because she is highly regarded in our team as a kind and compassionate leader, and workplaces need more managers like Chelsea. Can you give us a bit of a brief context as to what your role entails and how you came to be Head of Marketing here at Culture Shift?
Yeah, of course. As Head of Marketing, I am responsible for the overall marketing strategy for Culture Shift. I manage our agency relationships and manage our team of marketers at Culture Shift as well. There are 5 in the marketing team now, including me. I really stumbled into the world of marketing. Originally, actually, I thought I wanted to be an accountant. I was working in an accountancy practice. Their marketing manager went off on maternity leave. And so I was helping out, doing a few things sort of while she was off, found that I liked it, found that I was okay at it. And it kind of snowballed from there, really. So I did some qualifications through that workplace and stayed there for 9 years. I then joined Trust, which was the branding agency that Culture Shift was born out of. And at the time when I joined Trust, Culture Shift was like just a bit of a side project. And Gemma and Carl were like, we've got this thing, we might need you to work on Culture Shift's marketing a little bit of the time. And then within 6 months, that was my full-time job. So it like really quickly grew from the point that I joined. And then, so that was like 5 years ago. And then I feel like my career at Culture Shift has had like at least 3 significant parts. There was that time when it was just me. It was a bootstrapped business. There was like no marketing budget. I was the marketing team. Then after we got our first round of investment, another marketer joined the team. There was 2 of us. We had a budget that we could operate with. And then after we got our second round of investment, we grew the team even further. So we hired 2 more people and then another person recently. And I guess throughout that time, I've been developing my skills as a leader and as a people manager. I hadn't done that before joining Culture Shift. And that's something that I've loved doing as well. So I see that as a significant part of my role as the marketing side of what I do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So the topic we're looking to cover today is around psychological safety and building trust in teams. And as I said in the introduction, you've had really great feedback as a manager on helping to build that trust. But psychological safety, I guess, is a bit of a buzzword, and let's explore what it actually means and how you actually what steps you take to make sure it's something that is existing in your workplace, because it shouldn't just be like a tick box. So yeah, what does it mean to you, Chelsea?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for saying that. I feel really humbled to have been asked to be on this podcast episode. It definitely is a buzzword, and that was something that scared me when I saw that was the title of this episode. I feel like it can sound like quite a complex concept. But actually, it's relatively simple, although that doesn't mean that it's easy to do. Yeah. To me, psychological safety in this workplace in particular is about creating a space where people can speak up, can share ideas, can fail, and that's okay, and don't ever get punished or made to feel embarrassed or less than or anything like that for sharing any of those things. And that's why I say, it sounds like a simple concept, but actually that's quite difficult to put into practice on a daily basis.
Yeah, I love the idea of like feeling safe to fail.
Yeah.
And like in workplaces, if you don't fail and learn from it, like how do you ever progress? Like no one gets everything right the first time, every time. And, if you expect that people will, that puts such an enormous amount of pressure on individuals that they're not going to enjoy working with you and they're not likely to succeed either. So that like point around failure I think is really critical.
Yeah, I heard something the other day and I can't remember where this quote is from now, but it's someone who says like you should actually always expect your first attempt to be your worst. Like that should just be the norm. That's the expectation at work. And then you learn from that and then grow from that. And I think that all businesses and leaders, like operating in a competitive landscape, would say that they need people to be able to contribute ideas, fail fast, learn from that, make changes, like, be agile, be innovative and stuff like that. That would be an expectation, like that would be needed to be a successful business. But I'm not sure that people are always connecting the dots and saying, if that's the type of environment that we need to be a successful, thriving business, we need to make sure that we have created a space where that is achievable.
Let's talk about some of the practical things that Culture Shift is doing and like you specifically as a manager to build that trust and that psychological safety.
Yeah, sure. So I try to build that psychological safety from very early on in any interactions that I have with like prospective employees, so that they know that that's the norm and what they can expect if they were to come into my team, into the marketing team. So one way that I do that is by leaning quite heavily on our values. So we have 3 values at Culture Shift: unstoppable progress, unending support, and unshakable belief.
Well done remembering those off the top of your head.
But the unstoppable progress one is about continuous improvement and innovation, right? And you have to have psychological safety for that to be an environment, like for those not to just be words on a wall. So I talk about that value, but then talk about how we like bring that in into practice in a day-to-day basis. And I would try and lead by example with that. So talk about how, the journey that I've gone on as a marketer at Culture Shift and all the 1,000,001 things that I have done that have failed or that have, ended up being a bit of a mistake, but it's okay because I learned from them. And then as I grew the team, like other people have had initiatives and stuff like that haven't gone the way that we wanted them to, and again, like that's okay because we've learned from it. So I would always, like from that very first like moment in the first interview, try and share that so that people know this is an environment that I'm coming into.
It's such good role modelling, isn't it? Like, and I think that's key for any leader listening is, the fact that you need to be leading by example and setting that tone. And if you expect other people to behave in a certain way, behave that way yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
It sounds simple.
It sounds really straightforward, doesn't it?
But yet so many people don't do it. What other examples would you like to share?
Yeah, so then when I guess you're getting to know team members, like one of the big things with psychological safety is around getting to know people as people and as individuals, and not just for like the work output that they'll be like delivering to your business, like what makes them tick as a human. And what do they need to like thrive and feel safe and comfortable in a workspace as well. So always make sure that there's time to like get to know people on an individual basis. So that's like in all of our meetings that we have as a marketing team, like as standard, there is time to chat and check in and things like that at the beginning of those. We're also quite intentional about getting together and getting to know each other on a deeper level. So one of the things that's optional when you join Culture Shift is completing a user manual. Have you done one of those?
I have not yet completed a user manual.
Right.
It's on my to-do list. But actually, I think you're going to go on to say, but like doing it with others wasn't sort of something that I was offered when I started, because I'm not on your team. It's, you know, something that I think is a really wonderful idea. So tell us a bit more about like how you do that together.
Yeah, so it's something that's there. People can fill it in optionally if they want to. And yeah, like you said, most people, I think, just go off and fill the user manual in by themselves. It's basically a guide for your colleagues to read, to get to know you better, what you need to thrive, what you look like when you're in the zone, what you look like when you're stressed, and yeah, how you like to manage and be managed, and all sorts of things like that. Early on, when the marketing team grew to 4 people, we decided to get together and complete that together as a team. Well, we picked like 3 questions from it. There's like, I don't know, 16 or something altogether. But we sat down and we answered, what do I struggle with? What do I look like when I'm stressed? And how do I like to receive feedback? And we took a minute to think about that ourselves and wrote that down, but then shared. And I felt like that was so powerful. Like, everyone was so respectful of one another, like listened to what it was that they struggled with, like empathized with that, listened to how they like to receive feedback, and like really took that on. And now, you know, that's the way that we treat one another in the marketing team, on the basis of people's user manuals. So I think that's a really good thing to implement.
So it's really important that you, as a manager, I guess, get feedback in both directions. So we've talked a bit about sort of, how you might share with your people you line manage, and how might you encourage them to give you feedback, and how does that look in your team?
Yeah, I agree. It's like really, really important. Ever since I became a line manager, like I've been super, super keen to get feedback from people who I line manage on what I can be doing better to support them. Like, one thing I think is really important is that it's not like, oh, I'm a manager and I manage in this way. It's like, I manage this person in this way and this person in that way, because that's like what they need, and you have to be able to flex your like leadership styles and things like that to suit people. So always like really keen to get feedback. One of the things that I implemented was just surveys. It was before we had our own report and support system here at Culture Shift, and before we did Great Places to Work surveys and anything like that. So just for me to be able to survey my team on a monthly basis, and I changed the questions up every time depending on like what had gone on that month, or if there was something that it felt like I needed to give space to. It's not just work questions on there, so that's another opportunity to get to know people on a personal level. Ask them about anything that's going on outside of work that will inevitably be affecting them inside of work. If you're aware of something that's going to be coming up in their personal life, like, you can ask them how they're feeling about that, if they need any support during that time. And so with that, I always make sure it's tailored to the individual as well. So there's some questions there that are really specific to them. And I did that in a Google form so that people could take time to reflect on the month and give feedback in writing, because I felt that if I just went into the monthly meeting and said, any feedback for me? Like, what can I be doing better? 9 times out of 10, people would just say, oh, no, nothing really.
It's quite intimidating telling your line manager, oh, actually, I'd prefer if you gave me more warning to do that particular piece of work, or whatever the feedback might be. It's quite, so I really like the idea of people being able to do that in their own time. Yeah,
I like that. So make sure you send that out, in advance, so that people can take some time to think about it, and then it's already written down on paper. So then when you come to have the meeting, like, I'm going to bring it up and we're going to speak about it, and it's going to be fine.
They don't have to, and it removes that awkwardness for them, because I think if you've got feedback for your manager about anything, especially if it's something challenging, like you can really sit with that for a really long time, and it can build up to a feel much bigger to you, I guess, as the more junior person. And so, yeah, it's really nice to offer that space like on a regular basis and make it part of a pattern of a conversation, not just like a random one-off. Like 360-degree feedback is quite popular in a lot of workplaces, but they happen like quite infrequently. So yeah, this sort of idea of doing that and like just building it into the narrative of the conversation you have every month is a cracking idea.
Yeah, I learned something recently as well, just to develop that a little bit further, which was rather than say, have you got any feedback for me, make sure you put what's one piece of feedback or what's two, and like ask for a specific number, and then you're more likely to get some. Yeah. So that was quite useful.
Yeah. I know you have one, so let's just hear it.
Yeah, there's going to be something, so tell me what it is.
Yeah. That really is just like the going the extra mile, isn't it? And I think, a lot of people fall into line management responsibility and don't take the time to really consider the everyday actions that they can take, which will help to allow people to feel safe and comfortable in the workplace. And, linking this back to what we do as a company and why we exist as Culture Shift, like we talk a lot about creating speak up cultures, and people won't speak up if they don't feel that where they're sharing that information with is a trusted place and space. And so, yeah, each of these tips, I hope those listening can take on board to start to create, teams that feel they can share what's going on for them.
I hope so.
Something else we do as Culture Shift that helps people bring their whole selves to work is our shifter spotlights. I love them. So they're once a month, and a staff member gets to pick a topic that's close to their heart, and they get to share that information. So I play roller derby, and I did my shifter spotlight on what roller derby is. Not everyone knows it's a full contact sport on roller skates. But we've had them around improv and comedy. We've had them around being Welsh and learning about the Welsh language. There was a recent one about American football, and you got to take it outside and actually play football.
Yeah, that was so fun.
So yeah, they're like, we have lunch and we just take an hour, like really getting to know someone's passion, someone's interest, and we always learn so much from them. And I love it. I think it's a really fantastic thing that we do. Psychological safety and trust are obviously, as we've been saying, like things that are really important to people, and we can build them up with all of these actions that we've suggested in this podcast, but it's easily lost and easily eroded. And what are some of the common pitfalls that we might see for people who are perhaps exhibiting behaviours that might contribute to eroding that trust?
Yeah, it is easily lost, too easily lost. And unfortunately, like those small behaviours that can erode trust, it then takes so long can take so long to rebuild it after those. But it happens. I think that it can be a number of things, and it can be anything from not, checking your body language and everything before you react and respond to an idea, like not thinking before you speak, to, more extreme behaviours that we aim to tackle, such as bullying, harassment, leading a culture of fear where people just actively wouldn't share their ideas in those organisations because there's a manager that's going to come in and shout about this mistake that happened, or laugh at this idea that sounds ridiculous or something like that. And that sounds like it wouldn't happen, but it does happen. I've been in organisations where that's happened. An idea of mine has been, I've been laughed at, and it was horrible. And it does. I didn't share anything again, put it that way, and then left soon after. So it definitely happens. I think things such as like having one rule for you and one rule for others, I think is really damaging in terms of psychological safety. Managers thinking that they're above certain things and they can behave in a certain way, but other people have to behave in this way. I think that that's quite a common pitfall. I think taking credit for success that wasn't yours is quite a common pitfall in this. So I read a quote the other day again that says that good leaders or good line managers should take more than their fair share of credit for mistakes and less than their fair share of credit for successes.
Yeah, and so few people are doing that,
So
right?
few
But that
people
is
do
such
that.
a great principle to manage by.
Yeah, definitely. Like, if there's a success, it's a team success. Big everyone up, like celebrate that, celebrate the individual, you know, if it was an individual aside from you who originated that idea. But then if there's a failing or a mistake in your team, like ultimately the book does stop with you. And that I also really believe actions speak louder than words. Like, I think when it comes to damaging psychological safety, breaking a promise, you know, saying that you're going to do something and then doing another thing, is so detrimental. So yeah, again, it sounds straightforward, but just avoid doing that. Like, if you say you're going to do something, do it, so that your team know that they can trust you to.
Yeah, I think it's about not over promising and under delivering, but perhaps flipping it on its head, right? And being confident in what your capacity is and knowing that. And that's quite a core management responsibility, actually, to know what you can take on in supporting your team, what you can support them to deliver, not setting them up to fail. I think all of those things are part of that, like not over promising.
Yeah, definitely.
So leadership styles change quite rapidly, I think, over the last few decades, and it's really interesting to see sort of, you know, what are the different management techniques that people get trained in, and how different people relate to one another. How do you, as a millennial leader, relate to that changing of leadership style?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that actually being a millennial leader has a huge impact on my sort of management style. And I've definitely learned a lot from being managed by previous generations in previous workplaces, what I don't like. And I definitely feel like I've then taken that on into how I, treat people who I've ultimately ended up line managing. I think before, whether this is a generational thing, but I certainly know a few people who would sort of tick this box. There was less of the getting to know you on a personal level, and there was more rigidity of management style. It was like, this is the way people progressed through an organisation and became managers, and they managed in that one set way. And I didn't really like that and didn't really respond to that very well. So I've definitely tried to take on more of the getting to know people on a personal level, flexing leadership styles, and things like that.
I wonder if there's also a bit of a gendered element to certain leadership styles as well, the sort of more authoritarian approach, and, the I'm right, you're wrong, I'm big, you're small, Danny DeVito, Matilda sort of phrase. But, there's a lot of that in the workplace sometimes, and I think it takes new and different ways of leading to need to come forward and redress that.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think there's something gendered in it, and with, levels of self-awareness and empathy and things like that as well. I do think that plays a big part.
Which mistakenly get called soft skills, but actually they're not soft and they're not easy. They're something that people have to work at. And like you said, you consciously saw a particular type of management style and thought, that's not the management style I want to have. And actually being able to learn from difficult experiences is really useful.
Yeah, definitely. I think another thing for me is growing up and in the world of work through a period of really dramatic change. When we talk about psychological safety and being comfortable with throwing out new ideas, speaking up, it being okay if some of those fail and stuff like that, I feel like you have to be comfortable with change. I feel like that goes hand in hand. And I went through a lot of change in the workplace. I was laughing the other day actually, because this makes me sound super old, but I applied for my first job through sending letters to addresses that I found in the Yellow Pages.
Oh my God, the Yellow Pages.
That was only 15 years ago, but like 15 years is a huge time.
Yeah.
And now, obviously, like so many technological advancements and stuff like that. And
yeah, do people not walk around city centres with CVs, like hand them out to shops anymore? Is that not how you apply for a job anymore? Like, that's how I got my first job.
And it's like, right, so, you know, I've had to like adapt but like over the course of 15 years, but now like people need to adapt over the course of like a month or like a year. So it is important to make those, you know, spaces safe for that adaptation and that change.
Yeah, definitely.
There was also something that I was thinking about, and whether this is, you feel like this is agree that this is a generational thing or not, but how like millennials prefer flat structures, and how that perhaps lends an advantage to building and creating trust. I know I feel quite negative about overly hierarchical structures.
Yeah.
And layers for layers' sake,
yeah.
I would say. And, you know, I feel quite lucky that in our organisation, I'm on the exec team, my line manager's the CEO, and everyone in my team will benefit from that direct channel. Like, that's about as flat as we can be, and I hope to keep it that way. And people who are in my team now will become line managers eventually as we grow, but I hope to keep it as flat as possible.
Yeah, I guess like for any leaders listening out there, the challenge for that might be that you've got, like, you know, if you're very middle heavy, that's quite an expensive outlay for staff. So if you have like that many people becoming managers, which is why, you know, structures end up narrowing. But one of the pitfalls I often see in larger organisations in particular is then one person managing really big teams. Like, I think someone told me they used to manage a team of 80.
Wow.
How do you even know 80 people's names,
yeah.
let alone what they're doing in their day-to-day job? Like, that is, to me, an absolute recipe for disaster in terms of creating psychological safety. Like, that just doesn't compute. And there may have been supervisory structures within that layering, but I think an ideal sort of maximum number, I think, for line managing is 5. Yeah. I think 5 is a hard number in and of itself. Not ideal, sorry, I should say like an absolute cap is 5. And I think anything like lower than that is preferable. And that's how you really get to foster those relationships, ask those personal questions, and spend that dedicated time, right? Like, we have a practice at Culture Shift where we try and have touch points at least weekly. With like one-to-one, we do stand-ups, so we meet in the mornings, we have huddles in certain teams, so we're meeting on a weekly basis to talk about project work together. There's like a real like fostered connection of collaboration as a group, but there's also like those dedicated monthly one-to-one times which are about your personal development and your projects that you're working on. And, you know, the reality is that we hear about some horror stories where workplaces, like, people don't speak to their line manager for months on end. And you can't create that trust and that psychological safety with the person who is supposed to support you when times get difficult if you've never built a relationship with them.
No, exactly. And talk about setting people up for failure. Like, the leaders within those organisations are setting those line managers up for failure by having them manage so many people that it does become impossible for them to build personal connections with them. I really agree with you. Like, I think the sort of cap of a sort of maximum of 5 is ideal. And when you do think about the processes that we have here with the weekly check-ins, the monthly one-to-ones, the all the other kind of ad hoc catch-ups and things like that in between, that would become pretty impossible to manage if you were managing
that on a bigger scale. Yeah. Oh, no thanks.
No, thank you.
Thank you so much for this, Chelsea. It's been a fantastic conversation. We've covered so much. So thinking about psychological safety, some of the practical ways that you can help build that in your team, how it's more than just a buzzword, that it takes time and effort to build, and that it's easily lost, what are some of the pitfalls when it's lost. We've talked quite a lot about sort of leadership qualities and management style and skills, some of the things that we do internally as a company with our shifter spotlights. And it's just been, a really interesting conversation that I hope lots of people will benefit from, some of the tips and ideas that we've suggested today. So thank you so much.
Oh yeah, thank you so much for having me. I hope people enjoy listening. I have loved chatting with you about this topic.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of The Culture Shift. We hope you found it insightful and informative. We really appreciate your support and value your feedback. So if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review, share your thoughts, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button to stay updated on when we release new episodes. If you're interested in our other content or how Culture Shift can help your organisation, check out our YouTube channel, website, or drop us a message, and I'll see you next time.